2018. We're going to start with Sonic CMO, Lori Abou Habib. Hi, Lori.
Hey, Steve. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you. And I understand you're in the middle of an ice storm.
You know, because it's 2020, right? So we can have like anything normal.
Now, I'm gonna hand it over to Lori in a second, and she's gonna be talking to us about explain how a centralized conglomerate like Inspire approaches the building of a highly individualized 65-year-old brand with its own customer base and culture. And then I'll pop in and we'll have some questions, and we hope to get some questions from you as well. Lori Abou Habib well understands the transition, as she's been with Sonic for over 12 years, working her way up through many brand marketing posts until taking on the CMO spot in 2017. I'm going to hand it over to you, Lori. Take it away. Thanks.
Hey, Steve, I appreciate the intro. And it's been quite the journey. As you mentioned, I've been a Sonic vet for about coming up on 13 years. And I did just want to take a minute to talk a little bit about what the transition has been like with Inspire. A little bit about Inspire, if you are unaware of them. The company was really founded in 2018 when Arby's acquired Buffalo Wild Wings, as well as the Rusty Taco brand. Sonic was acquired into that portfolio in 2018, and that's when I became part of the Inspire family. And then Jimmy John's joined the brand portfolio in 2019. So now we can tout that we are the #5 largest restaurant company. We have 11,000 restaurants in total and about $14.6 billion in system sales. We have 1,400 plus franchisees, and the vast majority, well over half, are 1 to 2 unit owners. So thinking about really our role in contributing to that kind of small business of America. We have 325,000 corporate and franchise team members, and our brands serve more than 190 million guests annually, so about 60% of the US population, which is such a cool opportunity when you think about the numbers at that high level. So, thinking about really, Steve mentioned a little bit about where Sonic was pre-acquisition. We really had, some sales slumps to dig out of in 2017, and we're getting some momentum back really as we started coming into the Inspire family. And I think it was just such a great opportunity for us to really build on a lot of the approaches that Inspire offers. One of the things that Inspire offers is really, an opportunity to take brands that have a unique perspective and build on what makes them great. So, we have the opportunity to really utilize Inspire's brand management process. And so really thinking about what the brand is all about, who is the consumer, and how do you really codify all of the things about the brand. We were going through that process on our own, but really using Inspire's system to make it consistent with how the other brands approach. Was a great opportunity for us. And so, Sonic has always had a really strong culture and very defined core set of values, but really kind of signing up for that thing that we stand up for in the world was a little bit of an opportunity for us. And so using that process and really defining the purpose was key. And then I think the other part of that was really understanding who our consumer was. So, it's easy as a standalone brand to have a pretty wide consumer target, but when you think about, serving 60% of the US population and having a portfolio of brands, it becomes more important to really understand who your consumer is and how they're discrete and different from other brands in the portfolio as well. And so I want to talk a little bit later today as well about, that consumer-led aspect and how that's been a big learning for us and how we've really been able to leverage that kind of piece of the puzzle. So, lots of things about Inspire. I mentioned the brand management process really helping us kind of find that discrete opportunity, get our purpose established, and really permeate that through the organization. But I think the other part of the portfolio that I did want to mention is centers of excellence. So there's several centers of excellence throughout Inspire. Some of those are centralized work functions. Some of those are sharing best practices across the brands. But that has been a huge asset, I think, for the whole portfolio to really tap into throughout this time period of understanding, what the best practices are in different areas and really facilitating either subject matter experts within those centers of excellence or facilitating the conversations across the brands. So, it's been a great time to be part of a broader family to really tap into that, and build on a process and a culture of continuous improvement.
Thanks, Liz. Let's start by reflecting a little bit on the post-acquisition growth. And after, as you mentioned, Sonic had experienced some sales stagnation before the acquisition. What were the key drivers from a marketing perspective in terms of what really helped you turn the corner?
So it's a great question. And one of the things that I really wanted to point to, I mentioned this idea of consumer-led, and you and I have talked before about, everyone says they're consumer-led. Like, what does that really mean? And how do you really leverage that? And I think for us, it was one, getting closer to who that consumer was and really defining the personas, all the psychographics, everything about that consumer, building the kind of the tracking capabilities to understand where they are and where they're moving. But I think, as a marketer, one of the things that really stands out to me is, I think historically, it's easy to fall into the trap of viewing the consumer research and the information how you want to, and having that fit into your broader agenda. I think that one of the turning points for us was really putting the data first and understanding the consumer point of view and following where that leads you versus having it kind of fit in to your broader plans. So I think that was a big turning point for us, is really truly, putting the data and the consumer research first. And
You're a good example of that, of where you found something out about your consumers that maybe you didn't know, or you may have been going in a different direction.
Yeah, I think really, for us, one of the learnings was we compete squarely in QSR, and being, a dominantly franchised brand, I think it's easy to think about, especially in the last decade, maybe we have some fast casual consumers, maybe we can compete somewhere in between sort of QSR and fast casual. I know our consumers are shared in the QSR space, and we really need to think about the fundamentals of QSR that get us more competitive in that area. That was definitely one of those learnings.
And one of the places that I think you tried to excel over the last few years is in tech integration and using technology to create a more seamless experience. Were there places where you made changes to the tech stack that really impacted that consumer experience in important ways that helped move the needle?
I think we listened to consumers throughout the process from a technology perspective. A couple of things that stand out to me that were just different for Sonic was, we wanted to figure out how to leverage the service model. Having a drive-in format was different than the rest of QSR, and how that technology works. I think the second aspect was really personalization. So how do you design the kind of user interface and experience to really speak to personalization, which is a huge part of the Sonic variety and the Sonic experience. And so leveraging kind of those two aspects were really important for us to figure out, how to build some competitive advantage in the digital and the technology space.
Is there a good example about the way in which my Sonic experience would be more personalized than, say, it might be from a competitor?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of different things. One is we have a digital menu component that when you pull into the stall, it greets you by name when you check in with an off-premise order. So there is, that connectivity right away versus sort of a queuing system. So it's this idea of sort of first in line every time, you're greeted by name, and leveraging that drive-in component. And then I think the second aspect is, really taking time to curate the sort of personalization options that go into the menu when you're building your order. And, we have over 1 million drink combinations. How does that really come to life in a turnkey way, in a way that's super approachable for that amount of variety when you're ordering in the app?
So that super seamlessness, where the people, where someone really is, you're using a technology to make someone feel as if they actually are being catered to at every part in the process, not only from the app side, but that extends even into the physical side back at, at the actual drive-through.
Absolutely, well said.
So obviously the car hop model and the drive-in model was sort of made for the pandemic in a lot of ways. But what have been some of the surprises during this period? What have been some of the surprises, especially that you've learned gleaned maybe from your customers, or what's most important to your customers during this?
One thing that we talked a lot about as we really developed the positioning of the brand was embracing this idea of indulgence. So if you guys are familiar with Sonic, there's a lot of indulgent aspects about the menu, whether that is, ice cream and drinks, whether it's chili cheese tots, which I was a little hurt no one mentioned as their favorite fast food item. But, that part of the menu, like highly craveable food, that certainly has emerged as a strength that we didn't really anticipate. I joke about, people eating their feelings. Like there's been a lot of people eating their feelings, and it's been, a great opportunity for Sonic to lean into craveable food and indulgence, not just from the food, but as an escape. If it's some me time where you can get away and have, 15 minutes away from your kids that you're now around every minute of every day. It's that indulgence aspect that we kind of developed in the positioning, but we're really, surprised on how much we could lean into that in the last 9 months or so.
What have been some of the key pivots that you made as a result of some of those insights? What are the most successful moves that you made, you think?
So, Liz talked a lot about being nimble and flexible. I think that, thinking about the promotional calendar, what you lean into in terms of making sure that you have those craveable items. One of the big pivots I think for us too was we didn't expect to have the kind of volumes that we were having. So it was really about balancing how much promotional pressure you put out there and how much our crews and our stores can really maintain in light of kind of that increased business. So it's been kind of a fine line to walk and really balancing how much promotional activity and then how much we really wanted to enable the experience. And so I think it's been a constant cross-functional collaboration of really just making sure that we can uphold the experience and still deliver kind of the value and the innovation that our consumers expect.
Now, so let me sort of back up to one of the things that you mentioned or when we opened about your centers of excellence, working across and sharing learnings across what really is a portfolio of very different brands that I imagine were experiencing the crisis in different ways. So what were the key things, go back to that structure, what were some of the key things that you were able to share from those centers of excellence among one another that applied equally across?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the team's really organized functionally very quickly around understanding the landscape. So our operations teams, comparing notes across dining rooms, how that works across different geographies. Those were really key opportunities for us to connect on and develop best practices on how are you approaching, things like supply chain shortages. How are you approaching, the different operational requirements by city and state? So those were definitely a couple of areas that it was great to compare notes on. I think from a marketing side, we were really able to talk about where we were seeing opportunities from an occasion standpoint, or where maybe there were things to fortify. I think everyone's day part model really changed pretty significantly, and so being able to see how that worked across different landscapes, different sectors of restaurants was really beneficial to get a clear picture of where consumers were going and why.
How did your own media plan change?
I think going back to that word flexibility was key, really making sure that we had the flexibility we needed. I will say we certainly leveraged digital in a much stronger way. Obviously, sports was the thing that had the most impact, I think, for us, really not being able to leverage that key part of our buy. And so figuring out where's the right space to reinvest that money. Digital was an obvious choice for us, especially we saw a ton of growth in our off-premise ordering. And so really making sure that we can leverage that opportunity and talk about contactless ordering and payment that a drive-in model offers. The ability to eat in your car. So we quickly pivoted to digital, as well as, making sure that we had some of those assets that we could use on TV as well.
Well, which channels were most effective then? So you didn't have sports, you didn't have those big screen opportunities. Then which digital channels were you leveraging the most effectively?
Certainly social. I would say across the social roster, we've seen a lot of great traction in the last 6 months by increasing our buys on Instagram and Twitter, as well as Snapchat. Those have yielded great returns for us. So that was a definite positive for us, but also full episode players, anything streaming, anything that, the eyeballs were just gravitating towards, and increasing, hours per day on consumption.
Now you were in the middle also of sort of a different branding approach, right? You were moving away from those sort of familiar two guys in the front of the car that we'd known for years from Sonic into what? Tell us a little bit about what brand transition you've been going through.
Yeah, I'm laughing a little bit because, like, what a time to change a campaign. We had a decades established campaign, to your point, and what we'd really seen, through our consumer data was it was time to make a switch. So we launched a new campaign in February. February, years and years ago, it seems like now, but we launched a new campaign that really kind of pivoted from this idea. Historically, our campaign had really been all about, this is how you Sonic. So kind of demonstrating how to Sonic. And the switch was really over to, this is how we Sonic. So versus telling people how to do it, really celebrating all the ways that people already are. And we actually shifted from, casting actors in our spots to recruiting actual real life consumers and just filming all of the experiences, them actually, how they enjoy the food, all the different ways they enjoy the food, who they're with, and their experiences in the car. And that really became the foundation of our advertising campaign, as just them interacting with the brand, the experiences, and the food in a completely authentic way.
So then how did you have to go about, as the pandemic hit, then you had a new branding campaign, very different creative approach. How did that impact the ways in which you were thinking about creative and even practically able to manage, making new creative?
It was a very, very happy accident. I think that we had hours of footage of families in cars really enjoying that on-lot experience. And so we were able to really leverage those true moments in a way that felt like really relatable to what people were going through in the moment. So I think it shifted more from talking about the LTO of the moment to really being able to talk about the experience and what that offers holistically, whether it's, hey, we have enough variety for everyone, or you can bring your family for a meal that's safe all in your car, or leveraging that digital aspect of contactless ordering and payment. We were really able to flex with what we had to accommodate those messages, which was so serendipitous. We couldn't have been more pleased with the opportunity to do that.
And I think, Brian, if you want, why don't we queue up just one of those? I know we have several of those samples, but Brian, if you could queue up just one of those samples of videos, so we'll just take a look at what the new branding looks like.
In Searcy, Arkansas, a young man says I love you for the first time, but his girlfriend doesn't quite hear. In Franklin, Tennessee, a boy encounters his first pickle. And in Kyle, Texas, after a mission for tots, cousins realize they're a long way from Kyle, Texas. One day, many people, millions of orders. This is how we Sonic.
Okay. So that I imagine was done. Was that creative that was made before the pandemic? Was that done?
It was, yeah. That was those were our spots that started airing in February with the launch.
Now, by the way, I want everybody to please use, if you have a question for Lori, please use your hand raise icon and get in line, and Lisa will get to you to line up your question. I also want to, it seems that now, whereas as I started by saying Sonic sort of had a leg up on the pandemic just because of the nature of your model, but now you could argue that everybody's your competition now, because pretty much suddenly you're in a world where everybody is doing off-premise, everybody's doing drive-through. People are now starting to think much harder about just the very experience of drive-through in a way they never did before. I've spoken to a number of people who are going to be speaking here over the next couple of days who talked about what a revelation it was to simply start, treating people on the line very differently in some of the ways that you already anticipate. So as you look on that competition that's coming up, how are you planning and thinking about it? That now your endemic advantage may not be as much of an advantage within the next 5-6 months.
I think it's a great question. I think we feel pretty bullish about the fact that we have, 67 years of running car hop experience that might be a little hard to catch. The service model has its own inherent challenges that we've had a lot of time to figure out. I think, the structural components of how our off-premise ordering capability works, I think, we'll probably buy us a little bit of time there too. But I really think, going back to that consumer-led approach, listening to exactly what consumers want and being nimble in implementing them, things like, new product news and innovation that give people a reason to come more frequently. I think you got to pull all those levers in concert to really stay ahead. And we're really excited about the future. And I think, the ability to deliver that friendly, personalized service is something that we're certainly focused on, keeping a leg up on our competition.
Okay. Let me ask Lisa to come in and see if we have any questions from our audience.
Hey, well, yes, we do. But actually, before, Lori, I want to actually say I will give you a shout out. When I first moved to Tulsa, I had a little stint there and I discovered your chicken sandwich, which was huge and it was so good. I was completely surprised. I had never been to a Sonic. Being on the East Coast, I don't get to go to a lot of where you guys are. So anyway, I just thought I would throw that out there.
Thanks for that. Yeah, you got to go out to Long Island. It's a little bit of a jog.
Yeah. So anyway, Liz has a question. Liz, if you want to.
I do, yeah. Thank you. That was really interesting. And I can certainly relate to the, it's hard to suddenly replicate car hop experience. So it's always helpful when you have a number of decades under your belt. My question is about your service model and how you approach balancing really the traditional like Sonic experience. It's so iconic. People are so familiar with that model with emerging technologies and how you really balance keeping that traditional model alive while also evolving with the times. Is there anything that's off limits that like won't ever change?
It's a good question. I think that if the 9 months that just preceded us have taught us anything, like nothing's off limits. I feel like that is probably a good statement. I will say that, there are aspects though, I'm really thinking about how to augment that traditional experience. So I'll tell you guys, we've been working on a tipping capability for some time. And so just thinking about how you use technology to really leverage that and amplify that traditional model, I think that there's opportunities to rethink how you do some of those aspects of the experience for sure.
Okay, we also have a question from Lee Karchauer. I'm sorry if I'm destroying your name, Lee. Do you have your question? Well, she put it in.
Yes.
There she is.
This is Lee. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Lee.
Go ahead, Lee.
Steve, Lisa, Lori, thanks so much for doing the panel today. This has been great. I had a question for you around, it's actually around the launch of the new iPhone 12 on Friday, Apple's first 5G phone. And then I know Samsung's had their 5G phone in market. There's obviously a lot of talk around the possibilities of 5G when it comes to like creative capabilities and things that you can do from a marketing perspective with phones that are going to have much faster speeds and higher bandwidth. Has Sonic started to think about the future of how 5G could impact the restaurant business in particular?
That's a great question. I would say yes, but also within that broader bucket, I think of just digital content capabilities in general. I mentioned I might have not mentioned this, but one of the centers of excellence that we have from an Inspire portfolio standpoint is demand generation and personalization. So I think that is, certainly something that we talk a lot about is how do you really accelerate our content efforts to make sure that we can really deliver, that sort of best-in-class experience across all your channels that's really meaningful. And so it's a great question. And I would say yes, but also I know I speak for Sonic. We want to get better at the entire digital content approach, as well as thinking about those new capabilities.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. And Laurie, we have one more question from Nasli. Nasli, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks so much. Thank you again for the panel. It's been great. Laurie, I was curious to know, Sonic has had a good year in the midst of this pandemic. So I'm curious to know if you've been able to identify if this has been primarily increased frequency from your existing guests or new guests who are coming to the brand for the first time? And if so, how that's affecting how you're looking ahead to the next year?
I feel like you're reading my mind in terms of the things that keep me up at night. No, it's a great question. So, trying to be true to that consumer-led aspect that I talk so much about, we have identified that it's been a 50-50 split. So half of what we've seen in terms of growth has been frequency from our existing consumers, and half has been new consumers, either from our existing segments or some new segments. And so I think it's been a really lively discussion, and it's a great question on how do you think about retaining these new guests into the business, and how much does that fundamentally change your approach to 2021? I will be honest, where we've kind of netted out is really dropping back and making sure that we take care of the core, right? But then where are the incremental activities that we can do to really retain these new guests in a way that doesn't take our foot off the gas for the majority, if that makes sense. So I think it's a delicate approach, and it's really easy to think about those new consumers as shiny new toys that kind of take your eyes off the prize. But I think that's where we've tried to apply a lot of internal rigor around making sure that we balance that approach.
Yeah, that's one of the weird byproducts of this pandemic, is that those companies who have thrived still have the lingering question: what did we thrive from? Our own native marketing talent, or did the pandemic do the work for us?
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue to our next panel. Lisa Abou Habib, Laurie Abou Habib, thank you so much for leading us off today.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was
Laurie,
a pleasure. Really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to chat with you guys.
I survived the ice storm.